I think the financial markets are very upset when they look at the Democrat candidate standing on that stage making fools out of themselves. And they say, if we ever have a president like this, and there's always a possibility, it's an election, you know, who knows what happens, right? I think we're going to win. I think we're going to win by a lot. But when they look at the statements made by the people standing behind those podiums, I think that has a huge effect, yeah.
Had to do with the coronavirus?
No, I think it did. I think it did. But I think you can add quite a bit of sell-off to what they're seeing, because they're seeing the potential. You know, again, I think we're going to win. I feel very confident of it.
So the sell-off was because of the Democratic primary debate. That was the president at a press conference meant to reassure the country and the world about the United States' preparations when it comes to the inevitable spread, which he doesn't see as inevitable, of the coronavirus. Donald Trump downplaying the virus's impact on markets, likely because a strong economy is his political lifeblood. But it's because of coronavirus, not the Democratic candidates, that the Dow closed down nearly 1,200 points today, its worst point loss in history. And it's on track for its worst week since the financial crisis in 2008. We are lucky now to be joined by my colleague from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, NBC News senior business correspondent and MSNBC anchor, Steph Roll. Steph, you know me, this is sort of the stock market tumble for dummies. Take me through it slowly and in detail.
But it's not for dummies. And let's say something quickly. I spent the entire day here on the New York Stock Exchange. You know what I haven't heard one single time? The name Bernie Sanders. Everyone here is talking about coronavirus. And here's where I want you to stay with me. This is about risk management. And risk management for an investor or a CEO or moms like us is exactly the same. We make our decisions based on trusted information. And right now, if you're an investor, where are you getting that trusted information from? The Chinese government? Not likely. The U.S. government? Not this week. 2 days ago, the president and his economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, said, we've got this thing airtight. And last night, even though the president was more sober in his delivery, still he said, we've got this thing all sorted. And then we wake up today, and what do we have in the state of California? So investors aren't saying the sky is falling, this is a pandemic. Investors are saying, we don't know what's happening. And because we don't know what's happening, we're going to pull out. And I would also say, remember what the president talks about when he talks about the booming economy. It's consumers. You know businesses haven't invested. You know this bull market from the blue-collar boom doesn't exist. Manufacturing has shrunk. It has all been about consumers out there spending, and they have been. But what advice are you and I getting from the emails from school right now, from our friends canceling spring break? Consumers are not spending when they're concerned that we're going to end up with a spreadable virus here in the United States. They're not taking their kids to the movies or going out to dinner, and that will affect consumer spending, and that will hurt the economy.
Would the markets be more reassured by brutal truth?
You know, that's a really good point. The markets would be reassured by brutal truth, but here's something slightly odd that we even saw last night, and I heard a guy say it to me here today. The president last night, even though he took a jab here and there, he was more serious than he normally is. And I spoke to a hedge fund manager who said, you don't see the president that serious. That makes me think, what information does he know that we don't? It's that the information we're getting is unreliable. And if you don't know what the weather is, don't you just stay inside?
I think people do. You make such a good point about people canceling vacations. We had a doctor on at the top of the program talking about looking at ingredients in medicines, and if any of them come from China, stockpiling those medicines. What are the other specific industries that are particularly targeted, other than the obvious ones, travel, drugs, things like that?
Here, I'm actually going to give you the reverse. The few industries, the few companies that did really well today, Netflix, Peloton, and Zoom. Zoom is a video conferencing business. All
so we're going to work
that
from
did
home,
well
we're going to be
bodies.
fit, and we're going to watch our favorite series. Steph Roll, I love having you. Thank you so much, my friend.
Be fit at home.
Yeah.
Planet Fitness, nobody's getting on any sweaty gym equipment.
It's a great point. Thank you so much. This is also going to be, you know, the hits will keep coming. Since we've been on the air, your newspaper has broken the news of a whistleblower. And I think we started with the information bottleneck because every action has a reaction. And one of the reactions of repressing speech and trying to control information is usually an uptick in whistleblowers. So we have one already. Let me just read to you from this. Federal health employees interacted with Americans quarantined for possible exposure to the coronavirus without proper medical training or protective gear, then scattered into the general population. That's according to a government whistleblower. In a portion of a complaint from the whistleblower obtained by the New York Times, it's been submitted to the Office of the Special Counsel. A whistleblower describes, and this whistleblower is a senior leader at a health agency, said the team was improperly deployed to 2 military bases in California to assist the processing of Americans who had been evacuated from coronavirus hot zones in China and elsewhere.
Look, it's too soon to know if this mistake, this alleged mistake, was a direct consequence of any policy decision at the top.
Sure.
But it does raise the possibility of the kind of thing that can happen if there is not good planning and preparedness for an outbreak, if there's not good communication. So right now, I think this is more of a warning flare. It can get bad, and if our agencies are not empowered and funded properly, it can get worse.
Well, let me ask you something else. I mean, there's been a witch hunt on the part of the president. His newly reinstated head of personnel, a 29-year-old who was fired himself for not vetting out his college senior deputy, they're in charge of purging the government of everyone around the last whistleblower. I mean, do you think this is a safe time to be a whistleblower?
Absolutely not. In fact, it's actually amazing that this person took advantage of whistleblowing to make this known, instead of simply going to their bosses or going to the White House and saying, look, there was a mistake here, let's fix it. It speaks a little bit, potentially, to a climate of fear, that people feel they can't talk back and bring mistakes up the command chain because they're afraid of being fired or ousted by the loyalty squad in the White House.
But they also know that their bosses can't speak out. I mean, it also might be an urgent way of getting health information out. Let me read you some more from the whistleblower. The whistleblower writes this, quote, I soon began to field panicked calls from my leadership team and deployed staff members expressing concerns with the lack of HHS communication and coordination, staff being sent into quarantined areas without personal protective equipment, training, or experience in managing public health emergencies, safety protocols, and the potential danger to both themselves and members of the public they come into contact with, the whistleblower wrote.
So this is, I mean, to Nick's point, absolutely critical to think about what kind of protections there are for people who just tell what's going on in order to correct it. That is the purpose of whistleblowing if something is not getting attention from the appropriate leaders. But, you know, a deeper concern is this is an administration that has put people in charge who are not qualified to be in charge. And that means when you see things like communication and coordination, people not being supported, this is Health and Human Services. This is not some agency that hasn't had to deal with health emergencies before. There are protocols in place. There are standard procedures. And there should be a chain of command. Not that mistakes don't happen, because mistakes do happen. Not that there isn't human error. But when someone is whistleblowing, it's saying this isn't, you have to be concerned about whether this is just a once-off, and you have to be concerned about whether you have competency in the governance of the institutions of government that need to deliver for everyday people.
I think it also is a data point in how it was received. That I mean, Mike Pence may have been put in charge for benevolent reasons to streamline the information flow. It's possible. But the impact inside HHS was a day later, a whistleblower complaint makes its way into the public arena.
This is the danger of having untrusted political voices lead the nation through this moment where education is the most important thing of all, and the danger of quashing the scientific voices. Look, this is just breaking and we don't know, but one interesting part of this is that this happened to be near where that first unreported case yesterday emerged of somebody who had not been overseas. So is this related to somebody engaging in looking into the infection of perhaps active duty military individuals and in fact contracting it, and now you have it spreading? The most reassuring voices and the most important voices in this moment are the nation's leading health officials. It's not Donald Trump or Mike Pence, and the test of leadership is recognizing that moment. And honestly, I give Eric Swalwell great credit for the tone he took about supporting the president in this moment. The opportunity for Donald Trump and Mike Pence in this moment is to say, we have this under control, and as a result of that, I want you to hear from Dr. Fauci and other health professionals, not to silence them.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there's a test for whether they will step up, and that's that this is also the administration that has tried to keep oversight from Congress. And so as Congress is now going to hear these news reports and going to ask to hear from people who have knowledge about what's happening inside government, whether it's being sufficiently responsive. Is this administration going to stonewall, or is it going to allow transparency and accountability?
And again, as a student of patterns, if they decide to go with transparency, it would mean breaking a 3-year record. And obviously, I'm with Eric Swalwell and anyone else hoping for the best, but the pattern is the opposite. When we come back.